Hello, I'm Ike Eastman, host of Eastmans Podcast Edition. Today's conversation, it's a genuine conversation, is with Dale Stark. Dale is a really interesting guy, retired Air Force, and an A-10 pilot. If you don't know what an A-10 is, Google it. They are some of the coolest planes that we use for ground support on the planet. Really, really neat. We talk about that. We talk about how he got into the military, which is a really, really interesting story. So if you're a young guy or you have young kids, high school age kids, this might be really interesting for you to see how the turn of events led him to getting in the Air Force as enlisted, and then how he became a commissioned officer. So check that out. We also talk about distractions, and if you're trying to focus on something and how to become really good at it, how to take the distractions in your life and put them away. We also talk about reverse engineering your life. If you picture something and say, I want to get to XYZ goal, how you reverse engineer to get to that goal. He's done it a couple times in his life. Actually, I think he talked about 3 or 4 times that he did it. That's a great way to learn how to goal set and how to get to those goals. So check this episode out with Dale Stark. It's an awesome episode. Not only do we talk about awesome manly stuff about being in the Air Force and being, deployed in Afghanistan, but also about ranching and being an entrepreneur and being just a family guy that'll help you, encourage you on your daily walk with this life. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Eberly Stock. Eberly Stock is one of my favorite backpacks. Now, I've been wearing their backpack for almost 20 years. They have lightweight backpacks. They have modular backpacks, everything from their mainframe, which is just a frame pack that you can put bags on. They have these cool outside called bat wings that you can use. So check them out at eberlystock.com and make sure you tell them Ike sent you. This episode is sponsored by Fold AR. Have you ever wanted to carry a little more firepower than just a pistol? In the current trying times, it'd be nice to have an AR that fits in a backpack the size of a briefcase. Fold AR has solved that problem for you. They come in a few different versions: fold in half rifles, fold in thirds, and even an AR pistol. Don't worry about finding the perfect backpack to fit them in. They come in a backpack specifically for them, and they look just like a regular small pack. Fold ARs don't just fold up and conceal easily, but they are very safe and will hold their own at the range. Fold AR is the perfect combination of concealment and firepower. But I appreciate you coming on and taking the time, and hopefully your day gets better from now on with no more heifers floating around in the neighbors' front yards or whatever it was.
Yeah, no doubt.
So actually, that's an interesting thing. You went from A-10 pilot to rancher. So you're like living the dream right now.
Yeah, it might sound like it and look like it, but it's a lot of fun. But as you know, it's a ton of work. So it's just nonstop manual, tool based labor. So everything from building fence, repairing fence, roofing, putting out feed, planting grass. So yeah, I love it. If you like hard work, you'll probably enjoy it. But if you're like watching Instagram reels, and I think it's like, just like holding hands with your spouse and walking down a beautiful pasture, and everything is kind of there, then you might, folks might be a little bit disappointed. But yeah, we it's a good, healthy lifestyle for sure.
So you're in Oregon, right?
Yeah, Oregon coast.
The what?
Yeah, we're on the southwest coast, so I'm outside of Coos Bay, Oregon.
Okay, that's beautiful country. That's damn near Northern California, which is one of my favorite places in the world. So yeah, that's awesome. So were you from Oregon originally?
Yeah, this is where my wife and I both were born and raised, right here in this town. I mean, I moved around a bunch as a kid, but we kind of kept coming back here. Like I said, this is where I was born, where I graduated high school and where I enlisted into the Air Force originally. So definitely home for us.
Cool. Well, so before we get too far into this, there's, it's basically going to be about your childhood and growing up, and if you did sports or if whatever growing up in that neck of the woods was like. And then of course we'll get into your military stuff. I know you've done a ton of talking about your military side of your life. We'll touch on that. We'll talk a couple things. I think I'm fascinated with the A-10 personally. But we'll talk about a little bit about that. And then we'll talk about, the ranch lifestyle and why you guys chose to do that and how it came to fruition and some of the struggles, some of the things that you guys struggle on a daily basis. Like you said, eloquently, it is not it's not the beautiful painting that everybody pictures it as every day. Right. You get woke up early in the morning and with heifers in the neighbor, that happens. And that's, that's like, that's not even that big of, that's probably not even the worst thing that's going to happen today. And then we'll talk. I always have 3 questions that are kind of deep questions, but one of them is, why do you hunt? We'll talk hunting too, but it won't be a big portion of this. It's kind of the red thread that ties all of my guests together. But one of the questions is, why do you hunt? And then the other question is, what are you going to be thinking? God willing, you have a deathbed. You're not, it doesn't happen instantly. What are you going to be thinking about on your deathbed? And then the third one is, do you know what a TED Talk is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so an 18-minute, 18-minute, very intense talk on something. If you had the opportunity, what would you do your TED Talk on? So those will be we'll kind of I'll fit him in where they kind of work naturally, or I'll just ask them at the end depending on how this all goes. So, is there anything you want to make sure and talk about?
No, just looking forward to chatting with you guys. Growing up, Eastmans was huge in our household. My dad's talking about how long he's, read the stories and stuff. So, and watched some of the programming. So it's just a real honor to be here, and I'm feel privileged to be able to talk to you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you coming on. This will be fun. It's pretty. It's meant to be just a genuine conversation about you and about life and about, your perspective on things. And you have a unique one like everyone does. So it'll be fun. So we'll get right into it. So you grew up, and what's the town you actually live in Oregon or close to?
Yeah, we live outside of North Bend.
Okay.
Which is not near Bend, Oregon. That's actually, more central. Like I said, we're on the Oregon coast. So North Bend, Coos Bay oriented together. Okay. And then we're a ways out of town, but that's kind of the closest area people are familiar with.
So North Bend is south of Bend?
It'd be somewhat south and really west of it. So it's not in reference to the city of Bend. It's reference to the Coos River. So.
It's the bend in the river. I got you. Okay. So you grew up there, moved around. What bring you to moving around so much?
Yeah, so I was kind of late Gen X, right? That time, I was born at the very end of the 70s, kind of, so that grew up in the 80s and 90s. And back in that era, people just went where the work was. So my dad was, big time hunter, like always, a lot of times worked out in the woods, but he did all kinds of stuff. So logging, truck driving, horse training, was a horseshoer mostly, but saddle maker, all kinds of stuff. But we would go basically wherever the opportunities were. So if you had a job on a ranch, that's where we'd be, and then a lot of stuff going on in the timber industry during that time frame as well. So maybe this mill shut down where you're working for that season, and go out to logging camp in central Idaho for a while. So and I think again, my dad may have a little bit of a wanderer soul as well. So I think he enjoyed it. So it just kind of floated around, and wherever we went, my mom made the house a home. And we really moved all over the West. So, I lived in Idaho, Washington State, Oregon, like I said, mostly, even in California for a few years. So yeah, just moved around to kind of wherever the opportunities were.
So do you have siblings?
Yeah, I've got one older brother.
Okay. So you're the little brother like I am. You
Yep.
got picked on a lot. It was fun.
Exactly.
So moving around, kind of the Western lifestyle, which is really cool, is everything from logging to ranching that's really neat. I'll bet that was a lot of fun adventures and being able to be friends with anybody.
Oh yeah. And we look at it now and like, I mean, for us, we're having the time of our life. Like, I remember one summer, my dad got a job logging out near Cascade, Idaho, and so we just basically sold everything and put everything in storage that was that we couldn't fit in our house, and basically set up camp just outside of this logging camp, and spent 3-4 months just literally outside every
Wow.
day, all day, out just outside of this, basically living in a logging camp, or like, nowadays they'd probably call that some form of child abuse, but like it's literally some of the best memories of my life out there.
You went camping for 3 months. What kid wouldn't want to do that?
Yeah, just out, like, you learn how to snare rabbits, fishing every day. Just literally outside in the woods, building forts. Had cousins with us, off and on, but me and my brother the whole time, and just had a blast. So it really was just that kind of Western, free range childhood. Like, from the public lands to the timberlands. I didn't even realize until I was, an adult in the Air Force, that it wasn't just something that everyone could do. It's just to go outside and be out in the woods for really unending space. It just kind of saw that as our birthright. And then I remember being out in basic training, or after basic training in Texas, and wanting to go do something outdoors, and maybe wanting to go try to do a bird hunt or something, and I was like, oh, you got to have a hunting lease, or you got to know a private rancher or something like that. And I remember just thinking, like, what are you talking about? Like, you can't just go to the woods, and anyhow, so yeah, getting to live out west and move around a lot, and being outside, it was really a privileged childhood. And not in the way they talk about being privileged now, but just being blessed with the outdoors and family and stuff.
Yeah, I grew up in a place that was surrounded by the whole county is only 3% of it's private, so the rest of it's all public land. And I remember when we moved out of that place and into part of Wyoming that was very similar. I grew up a very similar thing. And then I went to college and went, hey, let's go fishing or something. Everybody looked at me like I was crazy. Like, where would we do that? Like, oh my gosh, you poor people have survived inside this concrete jungle. Poor buggers, but they had no idea. So that's awesome. So you basically that would be an awesome childhood, growing up just fishing. Your mom must be an absolute saint to put up with that.
Yeah, she's like, she got a strong faith. She's a strong Christian, and she just goes with the flow. And like I said, wherever we went, she just made wherever we were into our home. And just, you look at, not to sound like that old guy, but you look at what matters, and it's like, didn't have a ton of just like material stuff. We had plenty, we had everything we needed, but just being able to be raised by your parents. My mom, thankfully, she was able to stay at home with us. So, you look at what really matters, and we had that in abundance.
Yeah. Yeah, she was always there if somebody did something dumb, and cut themselves open or whatever, and make sure there was lunch, and made sure there was dinner, and that's way cool. It's very similar to how I grew up. Very neat. So then you guys moved back to North Bend area and went to high school there?
Yeah, so starting sophomore year, and then that's where I graduated high school.
So did you always know you were going to go into the military, or was this I call it a tattoo moment where you're like, you know what? I've had 3 beers. I think I'm going to go to the military tomorrow.
Yeah, so I had always thought about it. Like, I was a Rambo fanatic. Like, I was that kid who wore camo like every day of his life for, 10 years or something. It was just like all my childhood pictures when I was young, just head to toe camo, and just loved Rambo and had my survival knife, stuff like that. So,
with the compass on the end, and you could
oh
open up and there
yeah,
was matches and a fish hook in there. I had one of those.
100%. Yeah, those are so cool, man. I need to get one for my
You know what?
girls.
I should see if you could still buy one of those. I should put that in my keepsake library. Those things were cool.
Yeah,
Worthless,
I
but
haven't thought about
cool.
those in a long time. Yeah, they're fun. Yeah, so it was always something I was interested in. Then when I graduated high school, I'd gotten really into the sport of wrestling. So at that time, I wanted to keep wrestling, and I got a little scholarship to our local community college. So I stayed there and I kept wrestling for a couple of years. But during that time, my parents were kind of more old school about it, where it was like, hey, you're 18. Like, if you want to keep living here, you need to pay rent and you need to get a job. And you need to stop being a kid and start growing up a little
God
bit.
bless them. More parents need to do that same thing.
Yeah, and I was super stubborn, so I'm sitting there thinking like, well, I'm here trying to go to school and I'm wrestling. I shouldn't have to do all this. So at this time, we're like button heads, and looking back now with a little more age and maturity, like they were spot on. I'm going to community college and getting like D's and F's. Like staying out till 3 a.m. and then coming home, like just not a serious student. Not, I wasn't competing that great in wrestling just because I was kind of in shambles. Just didn't all thrust, no vector kind of thing. Like just everywhere. It all came to head, and it's literally like that old school story you hear about where you get home and all your stuff's on the front porch. It's like, you're out of here, buddy. Like,
Really?
Yep. They're like, both my mom and dad are just like, we're not going to let you be a loser. Like, we're not going to enable you to just screw off, which is what I was doing a lot of,
Yep.
I wasn't some scholar, like if they'd seen me working my butt off and getting good grades, they would have been there, but they knew what I was doing. I was just partying and hanging out with my buddies, and so it wasn't working. So now now I don't have anywhere to live, so I'm like sleeping in my car at the beach, couch surfing with friends and stuff, and I'm like, I'm gonna show them, I'm gonna make this work, and they don't realize how smart I am, and
I got the world by the tail. I'm 18,
yeah, don't you understand? And so eventually it ended kind of how you'd expect. I mean, I'm like trying to go to school, wrestle, work, balance all these things, and not doing anything well. And I'm like showering at the college locker room, and just eating whatever. Like, it was just probably the worst time of my life. I mean, just a complete loser. Like, just couldn't get any lower. And anyhow, I got to the point where I probably did that for, I don't know, maybe 6 months, and I was just like, this sucks. Like, I'm never gonna make all of this work at the same time. And this is like now. This is '99, so I'd been out of high school for a couple of years, and I'm just going, man, like what other options are there? And so then I'm like, oh yeah, I consider the military after high school. So then I went back and talked to all the recruiters, and I was pretty fit. I got decent grades in high school. I scored really well on the ASVAB, and I was like, oh, okay. I started looking at living in the dorms, eating in the cafeteria, learning a trade at that time. I enlisted as a mechanic originally, and I'm like, man, this is looking like a pretty good deal, you know. So again, went down, talked to all the recruiters, was dang near gonna enlist in the Marines, and then I think the experience of living like outside of my car and you know, having this kind of terrible experience put a little bit of practicality in my mindset at that time. So I was like, okay, I'll join the Air Force. I'll learn how to be an aircraft mechanic, get the GI Bill, and then when I'm done, I can basically start my life then. You know, I'll have a trade where I can make a living and maybe go back to school or something like that. So that's really how I ended up in the Air Force. So signed up and then off I went.
So that's really interesting. You reverted back to your decision-making skills that your parents had instilled in you since childhood. And when things got really rough, you went back to that, like, okay, I really need to think through this, and here's my basic needs and what I really need to do. What do you think? Do you think it was your parents throwing your stuff on the lawn that was the catalyst that started that? Or was there some moment you're sitting on the beach in your car at night going, this isn't really what I pictured my life to be?
Yeah, probably a little bit of both. But, you know, if my parents had enabled me, like I think about that all the time, like who knows where my life would have ended up. It was not going in a good direction. So, I mean, I got a minor possession of alcohol arrest during that period. Like, a lot of the people I knew during that time and was running with, their lives did not go that well, you know. So I don't know. I thank God every day that they kind of instilled that work ethic and that accountability. And it was hard. Like my mom talks about that being the hardest thing she's ever done, you know. But
well, you're a parent now. Can you imagine that?
No, and I have daughters, so
oh,
different.
Oh, you and I both. I grew up with boys like you did, and I have two girls. I swear God gave me that to show me patience. Either that or I'd kill boys. I don't know.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, I mean, I'm thankful now that they had a standard, and when I didn't meet it, they held me accountable. And you know, hopefully, I don't have to kick my girls out. I don't think I will. You know, kind of a different time, but I think that lesson is still really important. It's like, hey, you know, if you don't meet the standard of behavior, standard of academic, you know, work or whatever it may be, then there's going to be consequences. And so either, you know, we can teach them accountability or the world will teach them, and the world will be not as nice as we are about it. So yeah, you know, I never doubted for a minute that my parents stopped loving me. And if I got in a real pinch, they would have been there for me. But they definitely thought, you know, found it important to kind of go that tough love route. And it really did kick me into gear. So again, it's just something I'm thankful for now.
So you went into Air Force as airplane mechanic. They put you through school, or did you stay at the community college for a while, or did they took you through basic and then put you through school, didn't they?
Yeah, so I went in as soon as possible. So I'm like, man, I got to get out of here. So as soon as I had a spot, I was able to go off to basic, and then at that point it's just basic training, military tech school, and then out to Charleston, South Carolina, to be a chief on the C-17. And so, yeah, they sent me through all the technical training. I just stopped school, basically just disenrolled at that time, and went off on this new adventure.
So how much schooling is required? I mean, it's years, isn't it? And to get to the point of you're a crew chief, isn't it?
No, it's not. I mean, it's years until you're like a very skilled, like capable crew chief. But I forget the total timeline. I want to say it was like less than 6 months until you show up at the flight line, and then you go through a training, like a local training program, and then you're apprentice under like an experienced mechanic who you work under at that time. So a lot of it's on the job training as well.
Did you enjoy the mechanic side of it?
Yeah, I did. Like what I think I found in the military that really worked for me was like um, all of a sudden all the distractions were gone, so I'm not worried about how I'm gonna cover rent, or I'm not worried about where I'm gonna get my next meal. I'm not trying to balance school and all these other things. And it's just like, all right, we're going to take care of all that stuff. And all you have to do is focus on this one thing. So I could just, I found out over like, oh, okay. Like if I don't have all these distractions in my life, I can actually be pretty good at something. And so just, I'd say from the start of the military was a pretty good fit. Like I was the honor graduate out of basic training, having been a wrestler. I was really fit when I started. So, and I'm, with the Air Force, so not super physically challenging, but it's like I was a couple years older, a couple years out of high school, a little bit more life experience. And so, yeah, it was like, I had always planned on just doing 4 years and then getting back on with civilian life. But I pretty quickly learned it's like, oh man, if I, you know, the military is very task oriented, and it's very clear the standards you need to achieve to be successful. So I really enjoyed that environment where it was like, okay, if you want to, like I wanted to be a flying crew chief. So you have to go with the crew out on missions, and if anything comes up in flight and you're off station, you make those repairs. And so it's like, oh, if you want to be a flying crew chief, you need to become proficient in all these tasks. You need, this much experience, or, whatever it may be. And so I could sit there and just like make a checklist essentially at home and start checking off of those requirements. And then it's like, once you got it done, like, okay, congratulations, you're starting off as a flying crew chief. And so I just started pretty quickly realizing it's like, man, if you're willing to put in the work, there's no limit to what you can do. And it suited me pretty well.
That's awesome. So how did you go from I'm going to be a flying crew chief to, hey, you know what? I think I can fly one of these things. And which is, I don't, correct me if I'm wrong. I was never there, but that's pretty rare to go from the mechanic side of the stuff into the pilot side, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not, I mean, it's definitely, you hear about it, and I did it. It's doable. But it's not something that happens all the time because it's difficult. You have to, for me, I was, like I said, I moved around a ton. I didn't have like this fantastic formal education where I went to, prep schools and all of this other stuff. So I was quite a bit behind academically, but um, uh, it's possible. So there's several programs for going from enlisted to commissioning. And then like I said about the military, it's like, it's very clear what the requirements are. So while I'm enlisted, and it started back in tech school in Shepherd. And one of the first aircraft that they train you on is the A-10. So the A-10 is very simple, the way that it was built, because one of the things I were looking for was ease of maintenance. So they could do all these repairs in austere environments. So turns out that A-10 makes an excellent training platform as well. So, you're in the classroom, you learn about a hydraulic system per se. So you're looking at slides and whatever. And then they take you out to the A-10 and you pull off the panels and you're like, oh, there's the hydraulic reservoir. There's a hydraulic pump. There's the lines. And you can just you can see everything. It's kind of like an old truck compared to a new truck, so it's a perfect starter airplane for maintenance school. So when I'm in tech school, I'm looking at this A-10. My instructor was an A-10 crew chief. He had been in Desert Storm. So he's telling me all these stories about the A-10 and the Gulf War and all the A-10 pilots and what the community is like. And then I'm sitting in the cockpit of this like badass jet, looking through the heads up display, looking at the wings and all the hard points and the gun. And I'm, 20 years old at this time. And then also it happened to be a pilot training base. So I'm looking at jets flying overhead, and you kind of seeing student pilots at the cafeteria and out at the base exchange and things like that. And I think at that time, I just got the first idea of like, I can't believe people get paid to do this. You know, it was like, I'm down here, I'm covered in grease and hydraulic fluid and hot and sweaty. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the work, but like, it's like, I would do that for free. I would pay to do that. I can't believe these guys are, you know, and like, you get down and you're like covered in grease. You look like a hobbit, you know, and then these pilots like jump out of the jet and they look like they descended from the heavens, you know, they're in the cool
like,
flight
holy
suit and
crap, it's the entire crew from Maverick just got off, you know, just walking across the tarmac.
Yeah, you know, I think any like red-blooded American boy is going to see that and think, man, that's cool. Like, I would love to do that. But it still didn't occur to me that it would even be possible. Like, might as well want to be an astronaut or the president or something, you know. But I got a little bit further along, and as I kind of started succeeding more in my career, I started looking at it, and it was like, oh, if you want to be a pilot, here are the requirements. Like, okay, you need a 4-year degree, so you need to get that done. You need take this physical fitness test. You need to take this standardized, it's kind of like the SAT, but for Air Force officers. You need to take that test. You need to have a commander's recommendation. So you start looking at like kind of reverse engineering what it takes to be a pilot. And I'm like, wow, like maybe I could do that, you know, like maybe that is something that is possible. So, you know, once I'm kind of more settled in my mechanic career, I start just kind of start taking some classes again. And now instead of getting D's and F's, now I'm getting A's because I actually go to class and pay attention and do the homework and kind of like learn the game of school, where it's like, oh, well, if you go to every class, pay attention and do the homework and then kind of listen and try to figure out what the teacher wants from you and do that, guess what? You're probably going to get an A or a B. So you're like, so you start having some success academically. And I'm like, and it just started building on that. Like, hey, I could probably do this. And then I start telling my leadership, like, hey, I want to put in for one of these commissioning programs. And eventually I had, you know, worked hard enough, gotten enough academic kind of like rebuilding to where I'm showing evidence that I could actually finish the degree and get good grades. And, you know, I think my leadership looked at it and was like, hey, let's give this guy a shot. So I put in for a commissioning program. And at this time, between classes I'd taken and classes I had passed, like before I'd come in, I only needed 2 years to finish my 4-year degree. So I put in for a 2-year ROTC program and then got accepted. The Air Force released me from active duty. And this was like pre 9/11. It was actually literally weeks before 9/11. So,
okay.
But back then, ops tempo was a little bit lower than it became during the global war on terror. So it was like I was only enlisted for like a year and a half. And my commander, I remember him saying like, yeah, don't, you know, you don't need to just wait here any longer. Like, just go and get another 2 years here. We'll just set you back 2 years. Or like, just get rocking on it. Don't slow down. You know, you got momentum, just go with it. So they sent me to school, knocked it out in 2 years. And then while you're in your commissioning program, you compete for pilot training. So then I put in to compete for pilot training and was fortunate enough to get a pilot slot. So that's kind of how I, you know, went from just screwing around in my hometown to, you know, being a mechanic and then off to piloting.
That's awesome. I think one of the major takeaways from this deal is that you put your mind to it, and you said something. You said learn the game. And life is learning the game. If it's childhood, if it's raising kids, if it's, you know, going to school, or if it's, you know, becoming a pilot or mechanic or whatever, just learn the game and do the work, learn the game, and understand that there is, you know, if you complete these tasks, no matter what it is, that you're actually going to win. That is so really, really, really insightful. So Did you know you were going to fly the A-10 when you went back to college and all that stuff, or were you just hoping to get into flight school?
Yeah, I wanted to fly the A-10. At that point, it was just something that had stuck from that kind of early impression. And but it's very competitive, like when you're in ROTC, you're competing for a pilot slot. So we had, I forget the total number, but a bunch of other students that are putting in for pilot training. And so I was fortunate to get a pilot slot. And so now you're in pilot training and you don't know what you're going to fly at that point. Everybody starts out at the beginning and kind of in the same boat. And, say there's like 30, 35 people in a class. And now I'm competing with these, valedictorians who were like top graduates from the Air Force Academy. And I knew a guy that went to Harvard. I knew a guy that went to Stanford. And
wow.
I'm like this like community college washout. I'm like, what am I doing here? But flying is one of those things where it's really hard to determine who's going to be good at it. Like it's like some of the smartest guys I knew were not the best pilots because in fact some of them even washed out of pilot training because they're trying to make decisions with perfect information. They want 100% of all the data. They want to analyze it and then react and make their decision. And it's like you need to be able to make a decision based off of imperfect information right now and then roll with it with what happens. And so it turns out I was pretty decent at the actual like stick and rudder kind of stuff. So through the first phase of pilot training, you go through and then they track select you. So you go through like 6 months of flight training. So you're with that, say, group of 35. And this varies year to year, the numbers and where they send people. But, this is just going back to my era. But after the first 6 months, they split everybody up. And they're like, okay, this group of guys are going to fighter bomber, track. This group are going to like heavies, so like cargo tanker type aircraft, and then this other group's going to like helicopters, and they go train with the Army. So out of that 35, only 6 were selected for the kind of fighter bomber tactical track. So I did really well in the first phase. I was like top 10% out of that group. So I got selected for fighter bomber track. So now I'm with these 6 guys, and out of those 6, like 4 will end up in a fighter. And then this is assuming not counting for like people washing out, but out of the graduates, but like 3 or 4 will end up in a fighter. And then the other 2 will end up flying bombers like P-52 or B-1s. So it was really a long shot, like just even getting on this path and then like threading the needle to actually end up in an A-10. I look back and I really feel just like blessed by God that it all worked out, because I feel like if I tried to do it like 1,000 times, it might be successful once. I mean, right. If you have like a bad check ride, and it's just these little things that make the difference, and so it just so happened that in the second phase of pilot training, in the T-38, which is the first time you're in like a supersonic jet that is super fast. It's got a tiny wing. It's very difficult to fly. I had a really hard time in that program. So I'm just fighting tooth and nail to survive, like every flight, every check ride. My learning curve was kind of slow. Like I'd be below average, and then below average, keep grinding. And then I'd get to the end of block and I would just shoot up and just like barely get to the standard. And then we'd start a new phase of training and I would be at the bottom again. It was miserable. I mean, it was the best time and the absolute most miserable time of my life. I mean, I have some of my best friends were from pilot training, because we just, it's over a year of just studying, flying, that's it. You just go to bed dreaming about it, and you wake up and do it again. But anyhow, I got to the end of the program, with all the ups and downs. My flight commander basically was like, he's like, we're gonna get you an A-10. He's like, that's the perfect community for you. You're gonna do great there, and that's just what you were born to fly. Like, he's like, it's just a perfect fit. And so I can go around and like, we didn't even have an A-10 in our drop. There was
Really?
it was like, there was like an F-15C, and then I think we had like 2 F-16s and an F-15E. But our flight commander was able to make a swap with another pilot training base. They traded the F-15E, I believe, for an A-10, and it just magically, maybe God's providence, but I can't even believe that it worked out. I mean, it was the probability was very small. I don't want to discourage anybody from trying to do it by saying how difficult it was, but
well, I think you're a testament to that it can be done, and even though it wasn't easy, which is also a testament. It's not going to be easy. You're going to have to put the work in, and you're going to have to struggle, and there will be struggles, but you'll learn from it, and you can do it if you put your mind to it.
Absolutely. And it's funny because I've had friends that are like, saw what I did, and they're right behind me, and they're like, I want to do it too. Tell me what to do. And I kind of line them all out, and I have this memory, and it like stuck with me. But this good friend of mine who was also a crew chief wanted to do it, and I'm like, okay, here's the mindset to do this. Like, okay, everything else in your life, like, that's over. Like, your social life, like, okay, you're going out to do this, that, and the other. I'm literally reteaching myself algebra so I can pass a standardized test. Like, that's the level where I had to go back to get where I wanted to go. And he's like, okay, man, like, I'm all in. I want to do this. And he's like, and then like the next night he's like, hey, you want to go to Chili's? Like, let's go. And I was like, what did we just, like, dude, you're not getting it. Yeah, I was like, there is no Chili's in this new life. Like, on a Tuesday. Like yeah, I think you missed what I was saying. Like, this is, I mean, maybe if you're ultra talented, you're like, you have this massive brain power, you could like also go have a social life while you're trying to accomplish these goals. For me, it was like, this is it. I had to be almost like psychotically obsessed about it. Sure enough, the guy never followed through with it, but I was trying to impress upon him, this is a new life for you. Like, you can later, you will rebuild your personal life, but for someone like me, this is all I can do. And so that's how I had to approach it. And if you're willing to pay that price, which some people are, then I'd say the sky's the limit. You can really do anything you want, but you're going to be just ground down to the core, and they're going to find out what you're made of.
Right. So start flying the A-10, obviously get deployed. Were you in both theaters? Were you in Afghanistan and in Iraq?
Just Afghanistan.
Okay.
I volunteered to go to Iraq in like 2007, I think. It just, the timing never worked out. So I deployed to Afghanistan 3 tours.
Okay. Wow. That's amazing. And for those, let's explain just a little bit about the A-10 for those that don't know. I'm a huge fan. One of my good friends, Glenn Eberly, owns Eberly Stock Backpacks, was an A-10 pilot, probably the generation before you, actually. He's a little bit older than you and I, but so I'm familiar with what they do, why the Air Force invented them, and how important they are for the ground crew. But let's talk real quickly about what is the A-10, what did they use it for, and why it's important.
Yeah, so the A-10 was purpose built for the mission of close air support. So in the post-Vietnam era, when they're looking at all the lessons learned of what went right, what went wrong, they looked at a lot of these the platforms that they were using to get the close air support mission done. And kind of in with that close air support is forward air controller, airborne, PAC-A, and combat search and rescue. So recovering down to airmen. So those mission sets kind of overlap quite a bit. And so they're looking at the what happened in Vietnam, and they were using, they took a lot of losses, because if you're participating in the ground fight, you're most, especially in South Vietnam, you're going to get shot up. So they're looking at, you're low, you're vulnerable, and you're in the fight where everyone's trying to kill each other. So guess what? You're going to take some rounds most likely. So they pulled all the lessons learned from the Vietnam guys. They even went back to like World War II era, Korean War. They made everybody read the book Stuka Pilot, which is about the Eastern Front, and one of the most accomplished close air support pilots of all time. It was flying Stukas in the Eastern Front. So they're pulling these lessons learned from everybody, and all this entire history of combined arms, basically from post World War II to present day at that time. And they said, okay, what are the attributes of an aircraft for close air support? And so that's where they came up with the A-10. And they're like, it needs to be survivable. So pilot sits in a titanium bathtub. So if you get hit by small arms AAA, it's not just going to poke holes
Rip
through
through
you.
it. Right.
Yeah. They have, multiple redundant systems. So you have 2 hydraulic systems. The reservoirs are separate. All the lines are separate. It's got mechanical backup, so you can isolate all these systems and fly the jet with just rods and pulleys.
Wow.
Self-sealing fuel tanks, big straight wing. So the aircraft is very maneuverable. So you can get down low and actually see what's going on with your Mark 1 eyeballs. And then a giant 30 millimeter cannon. So you've got massive amount of firepower. And that's in addition to 11 hard points where you're, carrying all kinds of rockets, bombs, guns, and missiles. So really just an airplane purpose built for the close air support mission. And that's where they got the A-10.
So they built this plane for, if you're recovering airmen that crashed or whatever, or you're having, close encounters, and the guys on the ground need air support and they need it now. And, a 30 millimeter cannon is huge. I mean, I've heard it said multiple times. They basically put a gun on a lift and said, okay, we're going to build an airplane around this. How do we do that? And it's super heavy, lots of rounds. How many rounds does one of those things have?
1,174 rounds, and it fires at 70 rounds a second. So
good Lord.
It's so awesome to shoot. It's so much fun.
So here's a question I asked Glenn. When you let that thing off, did they have to re-engineer the airplane because of the recoil?
There were a lot of issues with the gun, and specifically the recoil. I'm not sure. I know they had issues, with the bullets tracking up with the aircraft just by the movement of the gun firing. So they did build in some systems in the avionics to help stabilize the aircraft. And then also the engine started to flame out from the gun gas. So they built these little winglets that would direct the gun gas away from the engine intakes. So the test pilots that were first rocking this thing had their hands full.
Yeah. It's just like if you've ever shot a fully automatic weapon, when you let that thing go, you're aiming at the target. By the first time you do it, if you're not ready for it, by the time you let go of the trigger, you're aiming feet above, because it's just the recoil of the gun, just smacking you. So that's really neat. Okay. So, do you have any really cool stories of when you were in theater, like, something that you'll always remember that guys can get, like badass stories?
Man, it's just, so many stories. It's hard to know where to start. It's like, really the life of an A-10 pilot in theater is just being there for when guys get in trouble, So I remember like the first troops in contact I went to, and you've been training all this time, been fighting to try to get in theater because you want to protect those guys on the ground. You know, you want to do what you're trained to do. And then most of your missions downrange, you know, are not some like movie scenario. You might just be doing armed overwatch for a convoy. You know, they go A to B, nothing happens, perfect. You know, go home, high five, maybe play some Xbox that night, and do it again the next day. You know, like it was really really fun, to be honest. You know, hanging out with the guys and having a good time. But then you get that first time you get the radio call and they key the mic and you hear the bullets flying, you hear the anxiety in that you know 18 to 20-year-old's voice, and you know that it's real. And I remember the first time we got that call, and it was the wildest thing. You know, it was like tunnel vision. I literally watched my vision close down. It was so much stress just in your system. Like, these guys are relying on you. Mm-hmm. And so as I think back to the time lapse of this, and I bet you it was like a second, but it felt like forever. So I watched my tunnel vision go down to where I'm like staring at my instruments through a little tube, it felt like. And I feel like that physiological response, like elevated heart rate, kind of heart palpitations, a little bit of sweat, and you're just going like, oh man, it's time for a gunfight, you know. And I remember hearing stories from a wingman in the Gulf War who literally just wouldn't go into any dangerous situation. He was like, he would find a reason to have to RTB, return to base. Like, there would be some, you know, gnarly situation, and he would have an engine hot light, and then the next time it would be something else. And I think they ended up getting rid of this guy. And I just remember thinking like, you know, and I'm not some tough guy, but it's like, I would literally rather die than be known as that guy, you know, that told us about in training. And so then I remember my vision coming back, and it's like, and it just occurred to me.
This episode is sponsored by Sawyer Products. Sawyer is a cool company that provides not just great products like water filtration systems, first aid kits, insect repellent, and sunscreen. They also are giving clean drinking water to people around the world. Every time you buy a water filter, be it the small one for your water bottle or the one you hook onto a garden hose, you and Sawyer are helping a developing country with good, clean water systems. Their insect repellent is astonishing. They even have some you spray on your clothes or your pets to keep those creepy, nasty crawlies away. Their sunscreen works so well you only have to apply a few times a day versus every 50 minutes with the other guys. It is truly amazing. So go get some Sawyer products that not only work great, but also give back to the communities around the world. Check them out at Sawyer.com and tell them you heard it at Eastmans. This episode is brought to you by Team Lodge. Thank you, Team Lodge, for supporting the podcast. They have some really cool campers. They're very unique. They actually drop all the way to the ground, unlike any other camper, so they're stable and they're warm, super, super warm. You can put your four-wheeler, your side-by-side in it, so when you get there, take it out, drop it to the ground, and you have a nice, warm place to stay. Check them out at teamlodge.com.
I was like, I know exactly what to do because we have trained this so many times. And then from there, it just became you just prioritize and execute all the tasks to get you in a position to protect these guys. So it's like, okay, like, hey, buddy, like, we're going to be all good. What's your location? You know, what's your, where are all your guys at? So you get pointed in that direction. You calculate your new fuel plan. You start doping out their location. You start trying to find information on the enemy positions. And you just start, like, again, prioritize, execute all the required tasks to get in a position where you can provide that support. And then over time, you get a call for troops in contact, and it's like you have zero physiological response because you know exactly what you're going to do. No matter what they throw at you, you most likely have seen it, and you have some sort of, you know, technique or counter or tactic that you're going to employ for that particular situation, and it's like commonplace. So yeah,
That's cool.
Overall, I just remember that kind of evolution of learning how to go through those, experiences, build that experience base to be able to provide those guys the support they needed to get home.
So how long have you been how long have you been back to civilian life?
My last day in the Air Force was in May of 23.
Oh,
So
geez,
just
so
about a year.
yeah. Oh, wow. So this is all new, really new. Did you ever progress into like training, or, what was the glide slope out?
Yeah. So, first part of your career is a lot of flying and stuff like that. And then the second part of your career is more, it's like we joke around, it's like working for Target or something, except for, we have drop fire on people. It's like, but like home station is like oddly corporate, you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, you just kind of do normal career progression stuff. So you got to do a staff job where it's just like, they call it death by PowerPoint, where you're like sitting at a computer, forwarding emails and reviewing policies and plans. And yeah, so the most fun part is definitely the first half of your career. And then I had some cool assignments later in my career. I got to be the director of ops for A-10 initial training. So the A-10 training squadron. So I got to help write the syllabus for A-10 training.
That's
Fly
cool.
with new students, so got to do some cool stuff like that. And then near the end, I was a squadron commander for a range, like a training facility in Central Florida, down in Avon Park. And so yeah, it's a lot more kind of leadership, supervisory type stuff. And then at that point, you go from flying a jet, having a great time with your buddies, to okay, now my responsibility is to make sure the guys under me are being trained right. They are getting career progression, so they can accomplish their goals and things like that. Because like me as a young guy, when I had these goals of flying A-10, if I didn't have squad supervisors that were willing and able to help me achieve my goals, and it never would have happened. So I looked at it as like, okay, this isn't necessarily fun, but this is my opportunity to give back to these younger guys. So yeah, that was kind of the progression. Flew a bunch younger as a younger guy, and then more supervision, leadership, staff work until I retired.
So you retired, and somewhere along the way, because I've seen photos of your family, somewhere along the way you had this family, because the girls are older than a year.
Yeah.
So how did that happen? You knew your wife from high school, so there was some reconnection there.
Yeah, so I met my wife in like third grade, so in North Bend, and then we'd kind of move around and then come back, and so she remembered me, but we kind of like we crossed paths in high school a little bit, but not a ton. And then I was in Alaska, so my first fighter assignment was up in Fairbanks, Alaska. My first operational assignment in a fighter squadron was out there, and that was the first time in my life that I'm actually started to have a little bit more bandwidth to start building a personal life, start thinking about starting a family and things like that. And so Amanda, my wife, she was like an excellent student. She was the direct opposite of me. She was like on scholarship and a master's in chemistry from Vanderbilt. Like she's wicked smart. Anyhow, so she had finished school at Vanderbilt, and then at that time we just, now I'm done with all my training, done with my first deployment, and kind of like, okay, now I've got a little bit of white space to start doing other things. And so we just so happened to kind of reconnect, made some trips home here and there that overlapped with her, and so we just started talking again, and eventually got married, and then had kids a little bit later in my career. It's because they're young now; they're like 7 and 10. So that's how the the family part started and got going.
So was it always talked about, when I retire, we're going to move back to Oregon and we're going to start this ranch, and this is where, this is how we want to raise our kids, that type of thing? Or was this this place came available? What do you think?
Yeah, we were not planning on coming back. Like, I mean, we didn't really have a perfect plan. We're just kind of going with the flow. So, I'm accepting assignments and continuing on. And I always figured I'm going to stay in the Air Force as long as we're having fun and as long as it's working for us. And so, I have kids kind of that midpoint in my career is when I had my first daughter, and she's young, and I go off to Afghanistan, and I nearly missed the first year of her life with spin up and training and everything like that. And then I get back, and then I'm more in these training roles for after that deployment. So I'm having some more family time, but we're still moving frequently. And we both started recognizing that our kids, it wasn't great for them. Like, some people are very every kid is different. Some are very resilient, social, things like that. Other kids need that kind of consistency and stability and extended family network and things like that. And I saw my oldest daughter go from just being like a child prodigy, almost like just the most bright, like extroverted kid, to where after like the third move, she just like didn't want to make friends because she knew we were just going to move again. And I just kind of saw her like shutting down, and it just, I'm going, man, like, this is not, if we just keep going like this for, another 10 years, which a lot of people do. And my youngest, she was kind of too young for me to assess at that time, like how she was going to respond to it. But for my older daughter, I was like, this is not good for her personally. I could just feel it in my bones,
Mm-hmm.
So then, and I'm approaching 20 years in service at this point. And so I'm going like, okay, we need to, like, let's start thinking about our exit. Like, this is not fun for me anymore. And then as you progress in your career, the moves accelerate, because when you're like a lieutenant colonel, now you're kind of in the position for squadron command. So it might take you over here for this developmental opportunity for a year, and then you go to command, then you need this staff job, or you need this school to make the next rank and things like that. And I remember while I was in squadron command, my boss brought me in to talk about what's next. Like, hey, you need to go to Air War College and then set you up for 06, and kind of talking about that career progression. And I'm like, man, that's a 10-month school, and then staff, and then I would, assuming I got promoted on time, then I would go off to the next thing. I'm going, okay, like, I'm out.
Yeah.
So that's what drove our decision to get out. And then during that time too, is during all the COVID madness, and I think that caused a lot of people to reflect on their lives. So I had just assumed that I would continue serving in the Air Force, or I would go to the airlines, or I would go to corporate America. I mean, the Air Force paid for me to get an MBA. So those are kind of like the logical paths, but the closer I got to that decision point, I'm going, that is not the lifestyle I want to live. Like, I don't want to live in a big city and commute, and maybe my wife has to work to afford it to live here, and then our kids are going to school and daycare, whatever it may be. I'm looking at that going, man, this does not appeal to me. And we had both, she had a successful career before we had kids, and we're both kind of savers and investors, so we didn't have any huge debt or anything. And so we just started really just kind of like reverse engineering the lifestyle that we wanted to live. And when I was a kid, like I said, I was outside all the time. We had access to all these public lands. I worked on dairy farms. I remember, bucking hay bales and all this stuff. And I'm like, we just started looking at it and going, man, that would be great if we could kind of figure something out to where we could raise our kids in that kind of healthy environment. And at that time we're visiting home here and there too, and we start missing our family a lot. And my mother-in-law had some health issues where she needed some emergency surgeries, and we're just going like, okay, let's be very deliberate about these life choices we do. Let's not just go with momentum, which is kind of how I had been moving along in my Air Force career. Like once I enlisted in the Air Force, it was just like throttles full forward, and I'm going with it. And then it's like, okay, I'm done kind of going with the flow now. We've hit the end of this journey. I started having a lot of like neck and back issues from years of flying and wrestling before that. So I'm just like, at that point, I'm just physically, emotionally spent. And I'm like, okay, I've got nothing left for the Air Force.
Yeah.
So it's time for me to go. I don't want to be that bitter guy that's hanging around too long,
Yeah.
So we just started reverse engineering kind of what do we want our lives to look like, And then so like it'd be great to teach our kids responsibility, teach them how to work livestock, kindergarten, all of these important life lessons that when we were kids we always did. Hunting, fishing, I never even thought of hunting and fishing as like a sport or an extracurricular activity or anything growing up. It was just something that everybody did.
It was like tying your shoes. We just do that.
Yeah, it's just integrated into your life, and I'm like, I want to give my kids something like that, So we started looking around, and we had bought a little house in a suburb, and the prices had just gone through the roof, So we just started doing the math, and we're like, we could sell this house that's like on a tiny postage stamp, and we could buy 58 acres outside of the town where we grew up, and just start going from there, So kind of a few years before I actually retired, I'd say we started really thinking about it and figuring out what we wanted to do. And then we found the property and we just executed the mission, and we bought it a couple of years before I actually retired. And it was an old dairy farm. So, but it hadn't been in use in years. So, I mean, the pasture was like just 12 feet of berry bushes with older trees growing all through it, old leaky barn, fences were like pounded into the mud. Like, I see barbed wire was there at some point, but now it's a rusty line. So, and I'd spent it was 24 years that I had been gone, minus the time I was in school. So 22 years of active duty when I actually retired. But so I'm going, and I'm very specialized in my career now. I'm a pilot. That's really all I did. And then all of a sudden I'm back at this place, and I'm like having flashbacks to when I was a kid. Like, it's like I'm 44 years old, and I'm stringing barbed wire and cutting my arms.
I think your back hurt before.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, it's actually not, it's so bad. It's like the flight action of like wearing all the gear on your helmet and getting compressed. And it's like the farm work hasn't been so bad because I'm not like smushing my neck as much.
Yeah.
But it's like now it's like different aches and pains. But yeah, so it's like, anyhow, so like kind of circling back to where we started, and now it's like tending livestock, building and repairing fence, and I'm just constantly outside checking the weather, looking at the sun exposure, looking at the temperature. Is this going to grow grass? How much supplemental feed do we need? So it's like that. It's getting away from this highly specialized, technical, lots of hours in the office, things like that, to just wake up and work the land. My wife called me, hey, breakfast, on the little walkie-talkies. It's, hey, breakfast is here. Come up, eat with the family. Go back to work. Hey, lunch is ready. So it's like, it's hard physical labor, but you're outside, you're active. It's your own property, so it feels magical, to transform to bring a place back to life is an amazing feeling. It's just like good for the soul, to rejuvenate a barn and to reclaim a pasture. It just feels amazing. And, and then along the way now it's teaching our kids that responsibility. So, hey, you got to move your chickens or they're not going to have anything to eat, so, and they're going to die. And you're going to collect those eggs and we're going to take them right into the kitchen and we're going to make breakfast with them. So there's so many amazing lessons. They're just grounded in a way that's really hard to emulate in our modern world. So that's really what we're going for.
Does it feel like you're living two different lives? Like you had that was a life that is completely different and separated from what you're doing now, and probably by design.
Yeah, it feels sometimes. It's really bizarre to say, but I wonder if it even happened. Was that a weird dream? Like, did I actually go fly at a hawk for 22 years? Because, I've reverted back to my childhood. Now, my dad and I hang out all the time. We're like best friends, I see my parents all the time. My brother's here, get to see the in-laws. And we're doing the same stuff that we did as kids. So it's like that is really bizarre that I left for 24 years and flew airplanes all over the world. Now I'm back. So
yeah, it's like two different books. So are you guys able to get out and hunt a lot now, brother and dad? And
yeah, so my brother and dad, they're like fanatics, they're filling all their tags. And so now I'm just getting back into it. So yeah, we just, we did really well in the steelhead, salmon fishing, halibut fishing, and then we got blacktails, Roosevelt elk, and so pretty good large game too. But so now I'm just getting back into that whole thing.
So this would be, I think, really insightful. So now that you're just getting back into it, is there something that you really missed about it, or is there something that makes you go, oh yeah, this is why I do this?
Yeah, like I said, I never really consciously thought about how important a part of our life that was, but I alluded to how corporate the military actually is, especially further along you get. So I was basically living just kind of a normal middle-class corporate lifestyle, living in a suburb, working in an office most of the time. Maybe I fly once a week as a senior guy,
Right.
And so I know how most people live, I experienced it. You want to get some exercise, you got to go ride a bike at the gym or something. So,
right.
And yeah, now getting back into it, and it's just, you realize all of these outdoor activities are a way to just connect with nature, to stay grounded in reality. And I think when you don't have that in your life, it's easy to feel down, to become depressed, to not understand why things don't feel right. And then I look at it now that I've been there a year at this full time, and I feel better physically than I did 5 years ago by a wide margin. And it's because we're not built to stare at a computer all day.
That's right.
That's not how God built us. You look at how humans have existed for thousands of years, and they were outside walking all the time, eating real food, pursuing game, animal husbandry, all these things that we've done as a species that kind of fit into our physiology, that optimize our physiology, what we're built to do. And if you don't do them, you will not feel right. And then kind of the modern way is, if you don't feel right, you probably need a pill to fix it, And in reality, what maybe some people do, but what most people need is to get outside, get out of your head and get into nature. And so, so it just going through that transition and kind of reconnecting, it just, to me, it's just kind of eye-opening of what you lose when you're not doing a lot of these things that humans have done for most of our existence.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. You know, built to be outside and doing these things, not sitting behind a computer and you know, if you're feeling down or depressed, or if you're feeling aches and pains or whatever, just get outside. It is unbelievably how refreshing that is. Even if it's just walking the dog, just look at nature around you.
Oh, 100%. I mean, like I never thought how how fulfilled I would be by gardening, just planting
Yeah.
the seed and seeing it come up, and then taking that food and feeding it to your family, like that. It just makes you feel good. And so
Yeah.
it just, to me, and it suggests that there's something deeply wrong with the way that our society has kind of evolved to, and you kind of see, I think, a lot of the outcomes of that in our, if you turn on the news, our everyday life, you see it on social media, of course. And it's like, hey, we would probably all be doing a lot better as a country in general, as if people were just spending more time outside, getting that physical output. I think it would make a huge difference in the way people interact with each other and the way that, the way they feel.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So kind of actually that leads into one of my other questions, Dale, if you, God willing, you have the ability to be on a deathbed and it doesn't happen instantly, like getting hit by a bus or something, what are you going to be thinking about now that you to kind of use your words, you've led these two different lifestyles. Now, granted, you're only a year into this, but a year is long enough to understand, the benefits of it. What are you going to be thinking about?
Yeah, it's funny. I think you hit a certain age, you have these forks in the road in your life, and you do start reflecting on that kind of stuff. And, I'm no saint. I look back in my life, I've done good things. I've made mistakes, like we all have. And, from this point forward, I hope that my family looks at me and at that point, I'm going to be thinking that I hope that I fulfilled my duties, that I didn't just live selfishly, that I dedicated my life to, my family, my community, to my God, all of these things outside of yourself. Like I hope people, people I love look at me and think that I did what I had to take care of them. That's really, really what I hope.
Yeah, that's that. I think you're right. I think that we're all in that same boat going, what we leave behind is really, what we've grown, which is our kids and our lifestyle and the people around us. And that's our legacy, in my opinion.
Yeah. And it occurred to me a couple of years ago. I talked to Evan from Black Rifle about this
Yeah.
too. And it's something I've been thinking about, but it's like, you raise your kids up to a certain age, and I realized it's like, how are they going to learn anything from me if I don't actually teach them? It's like you have to verbalize it with your words and your time and attention. And it's like, how are you going to do that when you're working 70 hours a week and they're going to public or private school?
Yeah.
So it's like now I'm like, this is an opportunity for me to teach my kids, to help them avoid some of the pitfalls that the mistakes I made, and to just build that relationship. So it's like, when you're teaching your 10-year-old, like I didn't mention it, but we homeschool our kids out here. So
I was just going to ask.
Yeah. So, when you're teaching your kids math, you're bonding at that same time too. That's time and attention, and that's building that connection. And then when you have that time together, they're telling you about things that's important to them and things that come up, and you're able to kind of, you have that bond, and you're able to teach them and give them ideas. And I see the shift. I feel like before, I don't know, it's really easy to just outsource raising your kids to other people.
Right.
And this day and age, those people that are raising their kids in schools might not necessarily share your values. So it's like, if you don't take that dedicated time and attention and give that to them and pass those values on to them, then you're just basically rolling the dice on how they're going to turn out. So I pray every day that my kids turn out great, but I'm like, I'm going to do everything I can to build that strong relationship, have that trust and those bonds. So as they grow older, I can help them, navigate all the challenges of life. So that's really what my priorities are right now. All of the, animal husbandry and gardening and farming and really everything I do. I enjoy it, but it's really, I want to prep something for that next generation. And really it's nothing physical. It's spiritual and again, that relationship. And that's really what I'm shooting for at this point.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful, and I'm glad that there's people like-minded that are doing the same thing. I've talked to a ton of people that are making life choices based on what they're raising their kids to be on, little mini me's basically, and that's our intent, right? That's awesome. So one of the last questions, and this is always interesting to me because I've had some really funny ones, and there's no right answer because it's what's what you're passionate about. If you were able to do a TED Talk, Dale, what would you do it on?
That's a good question. Probably at this point, so my newest fascination is tree work. So being out here in Oregon, we're in the Pacific Northwest. We're surrounded by like massive Doug firs and cedars and spruce and alders, and there's just, if you're gonna farm in the Oregon coast, you have to learn how to deal with trees. Maybe there's places that are completely ready to go and you just have to manage it in that way, but if you're reclaiming property, you're gonna go broke. You better get good at felling trees and limbing and stuff like that. So that whole world is fascinating to me. And it's like the perfect combination of gear and like danger and problem solving. That now instead of going to bed thinking about flying, I go to bed thinking about how I'm going to deal with these trees. so I'll be doing tree climbing because you'll need
with spikes.
Yeah, or I have some techniques where I don't necessarily have to spike them, but I climb with spikes, or I do the it's called MRS, a moving rope system.
Yeah. And
you can kind of walk up the tree and pull yourself up with a pulley. And so I'm doing a ton of tree work, and it's obviously, you don't want to just be an idiot and kill yourself working on your own property after surviving, multiple tours to Afghanistan. So I try to be conservative and safe as possible. But I'm absolutely fascinated with it. Every night after the kids go to bed, I put on YouTube and I watch this guy Monkey Beaver on YouTube, and he's been doing arborist work for 30 years.
Yeah.
And I sit there and I have little lengths of rope and I practice all my arborist knots, and then I go out and tackle trees in the day. So right now, if I had to give a talk on something that I'm passionate about, it's all about learning tree work.
That's awesome. And you live in the perfect place for it because, in 5 years, you can have a full grown tree. And it takes, 100 years where I live to have a full, I don't have to worry about tree work.
Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, we're surrounded by I'm like, I need to push the tree line away from our house because there's 150-foot Doug firs within 50 feet of our house.
Wow.
I'm like, this looks really cool, but every time we get a big windstorm, I'm not sleeping a wink. So tree work is very expensive. So for me, I'm like, I just have to learn how to do this. And so it's really fun. It's
taking down 150-foot tree is, you don't just take the chainsaw out there and tip it over. That's a full-time. It'd probably take you a couple days to do that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it depends a lot on the particulars of that situation, but you might need to rig if there's you're going to damage like your roof or something like that, I've learned how to like rig the branches. So you like, set up basically an anchor and a block and like a friction device, and you before you cut a branch or top it or anything, you tie it off and you cut it and it falls, and then lower it down with a rope and a friction device. So that could some buddies of mine took down these 2 massive cedars that were hanging over the barn, and it was like 2 full weeks of hard labor.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Jeez, that's awesome.
We had to lower every limb and the entire tree. We had to rig. So
oh my gosh.
It was a beast.
So you obviously didn't ruin the old barn.
No, we preserved it. So
that's awesome. That's cool.
It's cool learning these like hands-on manual skills. Like I didn't realize how much I've learned about even raising cattle. Like we have a cow-calf operation. We've had it for 1 year. We had a first spring calf not too long ago.
Nice.
And I still am a complete rookie. But then a buddy of mine got 2 bottle feeders and called me. He's like, "What do I do?" I'm like, "Hey, I actually have learned quite a bit in the last year."
That's cool. Yeah, it's just fun. It's fun that we live. I complain about social media a lot, but it is fun that we live in a time. You were talking about YouTube, but it's fun that we live in a time that if you want to learn anything in 15 minutes, you can find some pretty credible resources on, cow-calf operation or how to fall a tree or, whatever it is. I was just this week, I was learning on, my daughter got a new bike last summer, and there's different types of valve stems. I had no idea. I spent like 20 minutes trying to figure out how to get air in her tire. Like I didn't even know there was different types of valve stems. It's so awesome to have that much information at your fingertips. Now, here's your warning. Be careful what you're listening to too, because there is people out there on YouTube that really don't know what the hell they're doing either.
Blind leading the blind. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He's got gray hair and he's been falling trees for 30 years. He probably knows how to do it.
Yeah, you gotta do a little background research on that.
That's right.
So he was running the channel.
That's right. So Dale, you're on social media. I know that you have a pretty big following on X, don't you?
Yeah, I just started posting, about what we're doing, and then sometimes, if it's too offensive, it's probably a joke. So I apologize in advance. Just kind of, I don't take it too seriously. Just kind of post about what we're doing, maybe some jokes here and there. But I don't know, people seem to like it and follow along. So not necessarily sure what I'll do with it in the long term, but it's kind of been a fun thing to do as we build this place up.
That's cool. Well, I appreciate the time. I appreciate what your service, obviously. I appreciate what you're doing out there, and keep living the dream. I know there's people that are sitting in the concrete jungle right now going, man, if I could only figure out how to move my wife and kids to 58 acres in Oregon and live the dream. Keep doing that.
Absolutely, man. And it was great talking to you. And like I said, it's a huge honor and privilege to be here. And it was just cool. Hope to expand on my, like now that I've gotten the property pretty much set to where I need to be. It's like, okay, I was just talking to my dad about it yesterday. So we're planning out our hunts for next year and stuff. So I can't wait to get more into your guys' world coming up in the coming years.
Well, yeah, don't be a stranger. And if you guys have questions or need anything, reach out. It was really good to get to know you. And it was a great conversation. And I just appreciate everything, Dale.
All right. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Hopefully those heifers stay within your borders. You don't have to do that again.
They probably won't. I think I have it dialed and then they'll be in for like a month, and then they'll get out every day for like a week until I find out what the hell they're doing.
It's like one of those things where I wish I had a tracker to figure out where the hole in the fence is.
I know, little jerks.
Yeah. All right. Well, take care. Have a good rest of your day.
Appreciate you. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye-bye.